Long before the rise of modern cities, before highways carved their paths across continents, the fate of civilizations was written in the flow of rivers. Picture Mesopotamia, the land between the rivers, where the Tigris and Euphrates once nourished the world's earliest cities. But what if I told you these legendary waterways were not alone? Hidden beneath the dust of centuries lie the ghosts of other rivers, mighty channels that once fed empires, then vanished without a trace. These lost river routes of Mesopotamia were the lifeblood of trade, the highways of conquest, and the silent architects of history. And their disappearance holds clues to mysteries we're only beginning to unravel. Think of a map of ancient Mesopotamia, and you'll likely see those two famous rivers winding through the Fertile Crescent. But centuries ago, this land was a web of waterways, some so vast they rivaled the Nile. These rivers didn't just vanish overnight. They faded slowly, their waters stolen by shifting sands, changing climates, and the hands of time. Yet their legacy lingers in crumbling clay tablets, in the ruins of ports built far from any water, and in the stories of merchants who once sailed routes that no longer exist. What happened to these forgotten currents, and what can they tell us about the people who depended on them? This isn't just a story of erosion and drought. It's a tale of human ingenuity, of civilizations adapting to nature's whims, and sometimes fighting back. As we trace these lost river routes, we'll follow the footsteps of archaeologists deciphering ancient maps, scientists peering beneath deserts with satellites, and historians piecing together clues from long-dead languages. Together, we'll uncover how these waterways shaped the rise and fall of kingdoms, how their disappearance rewrote trade networks, and why their rediscovery could change how we see the ancient world. So let's set sail on a journey through time, where every clue brings us closer to the rivers that history forgot. Mesopotamia's geography was far more dynamic than the simple land between two rivers description suggests. Between the Tigris and Euphrates, ancient maps and modern satellite data reveal a sprawling network of tributaries, canals, and seasonal waterways that wove through the landscape like veins carrying life to every corner. These weren't just minor streams, some were major arteries, like the ancient Pallacopas River, which once flowed parallel to the Euphrates, feeding vast farmlands before disappearing into the marshes. Others, like the Shat al-Nil, served as vital trade corridors linking cities that now sit isolated in the desert. The key to understanding Mesopotamia's golden age lies in this forgotten hydrology. When we examine ancient cuneiform tablets, we find merchants describing week-long voyages between cities that today seem impossibly far from any navigable water. How? Because silt deposits and infrared imaging now show ghostly riverbed subtle dips in the earth, traces of different soil composition, marking where boats once sailed through what's now arid plains. Near archaeologists found harbors and docks buried under sand, a full 20 miles from the nearest modern river. This wasn't poor planning. It was proof that the waterways moved, sometimes dramatically, leaving cities stranded as the life-giving currents shifted course. Climate and human hands both played roles in this transformation. Over centuries, natural sedimentation caused rivers to jump their banks, forming new channels. But Mesopotamians didn't just accept these changes, they fought back with staggering ambition. Babylonian engineers diverted entire rivers to sustain their capital, while Sumerian laborers dug canals so large they're still visible from space. Yet even their ingenuity couldn't always win. When a Persian king diverted the Euphrates during a siege, he accidentally altered its path permanently, dooming settlements downstream. Each twist in these waterways rewrote the map of power, determining which cities would flourish as ports and which would fade into obscurity. The most fascinating clues come from unexpected places. Take the waterless islands described in Assyrian texts, now understood as Tel's ancient mounds that were once surrounded by rivers, or consider the puzzling location of Mari, a wealthy trade hub whose tablets mention ship arrivals, though today it sits miles from any major water source. The answer emerged when researchers analyzed soil cores and found evidence of a massive distributary, a now vanished branch of the Euphrates that made Mari a bustling port. These lost routes weren't just geographical features, they were the invisible scaffolding of empires, shaping where people built, traded, and ultimately, where they were forced to abandon when the waters disappeared. What emerges is a picture of Mesopotamia as a living, shifting delta, more akin to modern Louisiana's bayous than the static two-river image we often imagine. The Tigris and Euphrates were merely the largest threads in a watery tapestry that unraveled and rewoven itself over millennia. As satellite technology reveals more of these phantom channels, we're beginning to see how entire chapters of history, migrations, wars, cultural exchanges, were dictated by rivers that no longer flow. And that realization changes everything about how we understand the rise and fall of civilizations in this ancient land. To grasp just how vital these waterways were, imagine a world without roads, where rivers weren't just sources of water, they were the superhighways of their time. In Mesopotamia, boats laden with goods could travel farther in a day than caravans could in a week, moving everything from precious metals to grains with astonishing efficiency. The lost river routes acted like invisible threads, stitching together a vast economic network. Take lapis lazuli, the dazzling blue stone coveted by kings and priests. It traveled thousands of miles from the mountains of Afghanistan, passing through a chain of rivers and canals before reaching the workshops of Ur or Babylon. Without these waterways, such exchanges would have been impossibly slow and costly, stifling the cultural and technological leaps that defined Mesopotamian society. But rivers did more than move goods, they shaped the rhythm of daily life. Every spring, communities watched for the floods, not with fear, but with anticipation. As the waters rose, they carried silt from distant highlands, spreading it across fields in a natural fertilization process that turned the soil into some of the most productive farmland on Earth. This annual gift allowed farmers to grow surplus crops, freeing others to specialize as scribes, artisans, or soldiers, building blocks of civilization itself. Yet this dependence came with peril. When a river shifted course, as the Euphrates did near the ancient city of Sippar, it didn't just inconvenience traders, it could strangle an entire region's food supply, forcing populations to abandon their homes in search of water. Military strategies, too, revolved around these liquid highways. Conquerors like Sargon of Akkad used rivers to move troops rapidly, launching surprise attacks downstream while enemies struggled to march overland. But the same routes that enabled empire building could also spell disaster. During sieges, armies often diverted rivers to cut off water supplies, a tactic that sometimes backfired catastrophically. Records tell of cities left permanently parched when the redirected waters refused to return to their original beds, turning bustling ports into desert ruins within a generation. Perhaps the most poignant evidence lies in the ruins themselves. At Tello, the ancient Gersu, archaeologists uncovered a massive harbor complex complete with docks and warehouses, all now stranded in a sea of sand. Nearby, inscriptions boast of ships arriving from distant lands, their cargoes fueling the city's golden age. Today, the nearest water is miles away, a silent testament to how drastically the landscape has changed. These ghost ports challenge our assumptions about ancient trade, revealing a world where today's wastelands were once hubs of maritime activity. The lesson written in Mesopotamia's lost rivers is one of fragile interdependence. Civilizations thrived when they mastered the art of working with waterways, building canals and levees to harness their power. But when those waters vanished, whether through natural shifts or human miscalculation, the consequences were irreversible. As we piece together this forgotten hydrology, we're not just mapping ancient geography, we're rediscovering the precarious balance that sustained humanity's first great experiment in urban living. And that insight feels eerily relevant in a world now facing its own environmental reckoning. Among Mesopotamia's vanished waterways, few spark as much intrigue as the Pallacopas Canal. This artificial river, painstakingly carved from the Euphrates by Babylonian engineers, once stretched over 100 miles, an aquatic lifeline feeding vast farmlands south of Babylon. Greek historian Strabo marveled at its scale, describing how it diverted enough water to transform barren plains into lush fields. Yet today, even its exact path remains uncertain, buried under centuries of silt and shifting agriculture. The mystery isn't just about geography, it's a window into how ancient societies wrestled with environmental challenges we'd recognize today. Ground-penetrating radar has revealed tantalizing clues: a snaking depression beneath wheat fields, its soil composition distinct from the surrounding earth. These ghostly traces align with cuneiform tablets boasting of the canal's construction under Nebuchadnezzar II, who saw controlling water as key to imperial power. But the Palacopas didn't simply fade from neglect. Evidence points to a deliberate choice. Layers of sediment show the canal was actively filled in certain stretches, almost as if Babylonians were redirecting its flow. Was this an attempt to combat silting or a strategic move during wartime? One clay letter from a provincial governor warns of enemies turning the water away, suggesting canals were both tools and targets in conflicts. The canal's fate may lie in a paradox of its own success. By enabling intensive farming, the Palacopas accelerated silt accumulation, the very process that would choke it. Modern parallels exist. Iraq's marshlands, drained in the 20th century, faced similar ecological backlash, yet Babylonians weren't passive victims. Recent excavations near Nippur uncovered a massive sluice gate system, hinting at sophisticated attempts to manage sediment. This wasn't crude ditch digging, it was hydraulic engineering on a scale we're only beginning to appreciate. What makes the Palacopas so compelling is how its story mirrors modern water struggles. Like California's Central Valley or the Aral Sea, it's a reminder that even the grandest infrastructure can fall victim to its own ambition. Yet the Babylonians' adaptability shines through. When sections of the canal failed, they didn't abandon the land. They built anew, shifting settlements to follow the water. Their legacy isn't just a buried channel, but a lesson in resilience that echoes across millennia. As satellite imagery reveals more of these lost arteries, we're not just mapping dirt, we're recovering the ingenuity of those who first tried to tame and ultimately learned to adapt to the whims of a changing world. While the Pallacopas Canal reveals Babylon's hydraulic ambition, another vanished waterway holds even deeper mysteries: the Shat al-Nil. This phantom river once twisted through southern Mesopotamia like a shimmering ribbon, feeding cities from Nippur to Uruk before disappearing so completely that scholars once doubted its existence. Unlike rivers that shifted gradually, the Shat al-Nil's disappearance feels almost deliberate, erased from the landscape with surgical precision. Cuneiform tablets describe its bustling docks and irrigation networks, yet today, not a single visible channel marks its path. How could a river so vital simply vanish? The answer may lie in the very soil beneath our feet. archaeologists armed with isotopic analyzers have become detectives of dirt, tracking subtle chemical signatures left by ancient water. Near the ruins of Lhasa, soil samples revealed sudden spikes in salinity, a telltale sign of evaporated riverbeds. Even more compelling are the layers of freshwater mollusk shells found buried under desert sands, silent witnesses to a lost aquatic world. These tiny biological time capsules confirm what ancient scribes recorded, that ships once sailed where now only dust storms wander. But the real debate isn't about whether the Shat al-Nil existed, it's about why it died. One faction points to climate data showing prolonged droughts around 2200 BCE, when rainfall patterns across Mesopotamia grew erratic. Yet others highlight an intriguing clue: cuneiform records from detailing a massive canal project that drank the Nile's twin, possibly referring to the Shat al-Nil's diversion. Could human ambition have accidentally strangled this river? The evidence is tantalizingly ambiguous. Upstream, sediment cores show abrupt changes in grain size, consistent with either catastrophic drought or sudden engineering interference. Downstream, abandoned quays suggest the water retreated faster than natural evaporation would explain. Perhaps the most haunting evidence comes from the city of Shurapak, where excavations uncovered a warehouse district built directly atop what was once the riverbank. The foundations tell a story of desperate adaptation. First came raised floors as waters receded, then entire buildings relocated as the river became a ghost. By the time Hammurabi's code was written, the Shat al-Nil had faded from royal decrees, its once vital waters replaced by overland caravans. What makes this lost river so fascinating is how its disappearance rewrote human behavior. Trade routes that had flourished for a millennium collapsed almost overnight, forcing merchants to adopt riskier desert crossings. Religious practices shifted too. Offerings to river gods dwindled as temples turned their prayers toward rain deities instead. The Shat al-Nil didn't just vanish physically. It faded from cultural memory, surviving only in cryptic references until modern science began piecing together its story. As satellite imagery reveals more of these hidden channels, we're learning that Mesopotamia's rivers weren't passive backdrops to history. They were active players, their comings and goings determining which cities would thrive and which would become footnotes. The Shat al-Nil's ghostly traces remind us that civilizations don't just shape their environments, they're equally shaped by them, in ways that echo long after the waters have run dry. The Akkadian Empire's vanished waterways tell a story of both human triumph and nature's unforgiving power. At its height around 2300 BCE, this first great empire stretched from the Persian Gulf to the Mediterranean, its cities thriving on an intricate web of canals that turned arid plains into breadbaskets. Sargon of Akkad's engineers didn't just borrow water, they mastered it, building diversion dams and sluice gates so precise that later civilizations would marvel at their sophistication. But this hydrological prowess may have contained the seeds of disaster. When drought gripped Mesopotamia around 2200 BCE, the very systems that sustained the empire became its Achilles heel. Recent sediment cores pulled from the Gulf's depths paint a startling picture. Layers of wind-blown dust abruptly replace river-borne silt, marking the moment when Akkad's lifeblood, its waterways, turned to dust. Some researchers point to volcanic ash traces in these cores, suggesting distant eruptions disrupted rainfall patterns. Others highlight how over-irrigation likely salted the soil, reducing fertility just as crops were most needed. The truth may lie somewhere between, a deadly cocktail of climate shifts and human overreach. At Tel Leilan in northern Syria, archaeologists found a city wall buried under 3 feet of sterile dust, abandoned so suddenly that cooking pots still sat in hearths. What makes the Akkadian collapse so haunting isn't just its scale, but its echoes of modern water crises. Like California's Central Valley or the Aral Sea, Akkad's farmers pushed their irrigation systems to the brink, then watched helplessly as nature pushed back. Cuneiform tablets from the period speak of black fields and thirsty canals, poetic metaphors that hid brutal realities. When the rains failed, centralized authority crumbled. Tax records show grain shipments dwindling to a trickle as provinces hoarded dwindling supplies. Yet the empire didn't go quietly. At Tel Brak, excavators uncovered frantic attempts to deepen wells as water tables dropped. Near Mosul, a massive canal was abruptly widened, perhaps a desperate bid to capture every drop from a shrinking Euphrates. These weren't the actions of a society passively awaiting doom, but of engineers fighting to stave off the inevitable. Their failure raises uncomfortable questions about our own water-intensive civilizations. The Akkadians' legacy isn't just one of collapse but of resilience. When the empire fragmented, its people didn't vanish, they adapted, shifting to pastoralism or migrating to wetter regions. Their experience whispers a warning across millennia that even the mightiest civilizations exist at the mercy of their waterways, and when those waters disappear, so too can the empires built upon them. The story of Mesopotamia's rivers is written not just in clay tablets, but in the rings of ancient juniper trees. Scientists studying these arboreal archives discovered something startling around 4,200 years ago. The region suffered a drought so severe it lasted for centuries. Lake sediments from Turkey to the Persian Gulf tell the same tale. Layers of dust where there should be mud, proof that the skies simply stopped giving rain. And when the rains failed, the rivers followed. The Euphrates, once a roaring giant, shrank to a trickle in places, its banks retreating like a receding tide. But this wasn't a slow retreat. Sediment cores show the change happened abruptly, within a generation or two. Cities that had relied on predictable floods suddenly found their lifelines vanishing before their eyes. What's remarkable isn't just the climate shift itself, but how Mesopotamians responded. At Tel Taya, archaeologists uncovered a network of emergency wells dug deep into dry riverbeds, their walls reinforced with fired bricks, a desperate attempt to reach vanishing groundwater. Further south, cuneiform tablets from describe bitter water being hauled from unprecedented distances, suggesting traditional sources had turned saline as freshwater flows diminished. Some communities adapted ingeniously, like those near Nippur who switched from water-intensive wheat to drought-resistant barley. Others weren't so fortunate. The ruins of Tel Leilan in northern Syria show streets abruptly abandoned, with skeletons found in collapsed houses, their final moments preserved under wind-blown silt. These ancient struggles hold eerie parallels to modern water crises. Like California's Central Valley today, Mesopotamians faced a cruel paradox. Their most advanced irrigation systems sometimes accelerated their downfall. Canals that once spread life-giving water now concentrated salt in the soil as evaporation increased. At Gersu, soil samples reveal a white crust of sodium crystals forming just as the city's population plummeted. Yet there were also triumphs of adaptation. Babylonian farmers developed crop rotation techniques to preserve soil moisture, while engineers in Mari built elaborate silt traps to keep canals flowing longer. Their successes and failures form a playbook for resilience that modern water managers are only beginning to appreciate. Perhaps the most valuable lesson lies in the aftermath. When the Akkadian Empire collapsed under climatic pressure, it wasn't the end of Mesopotamian civilization, just a dramatic transformation. People migrated to wetter areas, adopted nomadic lifestyles, or developed new technologies like the Shat. a counterbalanced water-lifting device that allowed farming to continue along shrunken rivers. This flexibility kept their culture alive through the drought's worst years. Today, as satellite imaging reveals more of these ancient climate refugees' paths, we're seeing a pattern. Survival favored those who moved with the water rather than fighting against its disappearance. Modern climate models suggest Mesopotamia's past may preview our future. The same region now faces droughts of similar intensity, with the Tigris and Euphrates again under strain from both natural cycles and human demands. But this time, we have something our ancestors lacked: their hard-won experience, etched in ruined cities and forgotten canals. By studying how they weathered the storm, we might just learn how to navigate our own. Mesopotamia's engineers didn't just work with water, they conducted a symphony of mud, brick, and human ingenuity. Picture teams of surveyors stretching ropes soaked in bitumen to mark straight lines across miles of desert, their simple tools belying the precision of their work. At the heart of their success was a profound understanding of slope mathematics, achieved using nothing more than weighted strings and sighting poles. They calculated gradients so exact that some canals dropped just one finger's width over the length of a football field, enough to keep water moving without eroding the channel. This wasn't guesswork. Cuneiform tablets from Nippur contain intricate flow rate calculations, proving they could predict how much water a canal would carry based on its dimensions. The real marvels weren't individual structures, but entire systems designed to work in harmony. Take the Nahwan Canal, a 300-mile network that transformed northern Babylon into an agricultural powerhouse. Its builders incorporated ingenious features like silt traps, chambers where water slowed just enough to drop sediment before entering irrigation channels. Nearby, stepped weirs acted like ancient water meters, controlling distribution to different fields with stone gates. What's astonishing is how these systems adapted to seasonal changes. During spring floods, auxiliary channels would automatically activate, diverting excess water into storage basins that fed the land during dry months. Their secret weapon, bitumen, this naturally occurring tar, abundant near Hit along the Euphrates, was the duct tape of the ancient world. Mixed with reeds, it lined canals to prevent leaks. Pressed between bricks, it created waterproof joints that outlasted the civilizations that built them. Archaeologists have found bitumen-sealed pipes at Ur still intact after 4,000 years, a testament to its durability. But Mesopotamians didn't stop there. At Gersu, excavators uncovered a massive regulator dam with wooden sluice gates that could be raised or lowered to control flow, a technology so advanced it wouldn't be matched in Europe until the Middle Ages. Perhaps most impressive was their maintenance system. Cuneiform records from Larsa detail rotating work crews, each responsible for keeping specific canal sections clear. They used clever tools like bronze scoops on long poles to remove debris without dismantling banks. When repairs were needed, they didn't just patch, they improved. A tablet from Mari describes how engineers widened a canal bend after noticing erosion patterns, demonstrating an observational sophistication we'd associate with modern civil engineering. What sets these achievements apart is how they scaled solutions. While Egyptian pharaohs concentrated on monumental projects like the Sad el-Khafra, Mesopotamian engineers focused on decentralized networks that empowered local communities. A farmer could request a canal extension by petitioning the local governor, creating an adaptive system where water management responded to real needs. This grassroots approach may explain why some systems remained operational for millennia, outlasting the empires that built them. The legacy of these hydrological pioneers isn't just in their structures, but in their philosophy. They viewed rivers not as forces to conquer, but as partners to collaborate, with a lesson etched into every curved canal bank designed to mimic natural watercourses. In an era before pumps or steel, they achieved something remarkable: a dialogue with nature written in mud, brick, and flowing water. The Euphrates didn't just flow, it danced across the landscape, splitting into countless fingers that reached deep into Mesopotamia's heart. These distributaries, now buried under centuries of silt, were once as vital as the main river itself. Take the Puratum Canal, a major branch that curled westward to nourish Sippar, the city of the sun god Shamash. Today, Sippar's ruins sit isolated in a sun-baked plain, but satellite images show a dark streak in the soil, a ghostly imprint where water once shimmered. This wasn't some minor ditch. Cuneiform records describe it as wide enough for 20 ships to dock side by side during festivals. What's astonishing is how abruptly some branches disappeared. Near Nippur, archaeologists found a harbor district built on solid ground, yet tablets from the same layer describe boats unloading goods there. The answer emerged when researchers noticed peculiar soil patterns, bands of sand alternating with layers of freshwater shells. This was evidence of a catastrophic avulsion, when the Euphrates suddenly abandoned one channel for another, possibly during a record flood. One year, Nippur was a bustling port. The next, its docks opened onto a drying mudflat. The forces behind these changes were both natural and human-made. Seasonal floods deposited silt that gradually raised riverbeds until waters spilled over into new paths, a process called delta switching. But Mesopotamians didn't just watch helplessly. At Sippar, excavators uncovered a massive diversion dam dating back to Hammurabi's reign, designed to keep the Puratum flowing. Its failure is written in the strata. Layers of repair attempts, then collapsed brickwork, and finally wind-blown sand. The dam may have succeeded too well, trapping sediment until the channel choked itself. These lost branches hide more than just hydrological secrets. Along the presumed route of the Nippur distributary, ground-penetrating radar detected anomalies that turned out to be sunken barges, their cargoes of copper ingots still intact. Nearby, the outlines of roadside taverns emerged, watering holes for travelers when this was a liquid highway. Most poignant are the small canals branching off like capillaries, each leading to vanished farmsteads. Their silted mouths still hold ancient plow marks, frozen in the moment farmers realized the water wouldn't return. Modern technology is bringing these waterways back to light in unexpected ways. Declassified Cold War spy satellite photos, sharper than early NASA images, show crop marks aligning perfectly with Babylonian maps of the Second Euphrates. Thermal cameras at dawn detect buried channels, their damp clay cooling slower than surrounding soil. Even local farmers contribute clues, places they call al-Walker. The winding often trace the curves of long-dead streams. The tragedy and the lesson lies in how these shifts played out. When a distributary failed, it wasn't just an engineering problem. Entire cultures unraveled. Cuneiform letters from Lhasa describe merchants bankrupted when their docks became useless, and religious processions that halted because sacred barges had nowhere to float. Yet resilience emerged too. Some cities dug wells tapping underground flows from the old channels. Others became caravan stops, trading waterborne wealth for overland commerce. The Euphrates' lost branches remind us that civilizations aren't built on rivers alone, but on the human ability to adapt when those rivers disappear. The Tigris River's forgotten tributaries tell a parallel story of vanished waterways, each with its own dramatic tale of disappearance. While much attention falls on the Euphrates, the Tigris once boasted a network of branches that shaped empires, none more consequential than the Diyala River. Flowing southeast from the Zagros Mountains, this now muted watercourse was the backbone of Assyrian military might. Ancient carvings show King Sennacherib's armies crossing the Diola on pontoon bridges during campaigns against Babylon, its waters wide enough to challenge invaders yet shallow enough to ford with careful planning. Today, that same route is a patchwork of wheat fields, its riverbed detectable only through subtle dips in the terrain and the occasional scatter of water-worn stones turned up by plows. What happened to the Diola and other lost Tigris tributaries? The debate divides scholars. Some point to sediment cores near Baghdad showing layers of coarse gravel, evidence of catastrophic flooding around 900 BC that may have shoved the river onto a new course. Others highlight Assyrian engineering tablets detailing a massive diversion project to starve rebellious cities of water. One cuneiform letter from Nineveh's archives boasts of drying the enemy's roads, likely referring to strategic canal closures that inadvertently altered the Diola's flow permanently. The truth likely lies somewhere between nature's whims and human hands, a collision of environmental shifts and calculated interference. Recent excavations near Mosul have added fuel to this mystery. Archaeologists uncovering an Assyrian garrison town found a series of canals perfectly aligned with military descriptions of the king's liquid highways. These weren't modest irrigation ditches, some measured over 30 feet wide, with reinforced banks designed to move troops and supplies swiftly. Even more intriguing were the sluice gates, their wooden beams preserved in mud, showing precise notches for controlling water levels. This discovery confirms that the Assyrians didn't just use rivers, they actively manipulated them, turning waterways into weapons of war. Yet the most telling clues come from the land itself. Satellite thermal imaging reveals ghostly moisture patterns tracing ancient riverbeds beneath modern farms. At Tel Mohammed, a mound northeast of Baghdad, ground scans show a buried channel cutting diagonally across what's now a straight country road, proof of a waterway abruptly abandoned. Soil samples here tell a story of sudden change, layers of fish bones and freshwater mollusks abruptly capped by wind-blown dust. This wasn't a slow fade but a dramatic rupture, as if the river vanished in a geopolitical blink. The consequences rippled across centuries. Cities like Eshnunna, once thriving Diola ports, found themselves stranded inland, their economies collapsing as trade routes shifted. Assyrian military records later complain of supply chains breaking down as the western waters grew thin, forcing armies to march farther between reliable water sources. Even cultural practices adapted. Early depictions of the water god show him standing atop a rushing Diola, while later images place him on a dried streambed holding an empty vessel. What makes these lost tributaries so compelling is how their disappearance rewrote human geography. The Tigris didn't just lose water, it lost connections, leaving entire regions isolated from the networks that sustained them. As researchers pieced together this puzzle using everything from declassified spy satellite photos to Assyrian laundry lists, they recorded water usage for military uniforms. We're learning that rivers aren't just features on a map, they're living systems whose comings and goings shape the fate of civilizations. And in the Tigris' silent tributaries, that lesson flows as powerfully as the waters once did. Satellite archaeology has pulled back the curtain on Mesopotamia's hidden waterways, revealing a landscape far more interconnected than we ever imagined. What looks like featureless desert to the naked eye becomes a web of ancient rivers under the gaze of modern sensors. NASA MODI's satellites, originally designed to monitor ocean temperatures, have become unexpected time machines. Their thermal cameras detect minute differences in soil moisture, invisible trails where water once flowed, now marked by crops that grow slightly taller or greener over buried channels. In Iraq's arid plains, these spectral signatures have uncovered over 1,000 miles of forgotten waterways, transforming our understanding of how Mesopotamian cities truly functioned. The magic lies in the details. Multispectral imaging doesn't just show where rivers ran, it reveals their lifespans. By analyzing how deeply certain minerals like gypsum are leached into the soil, scientists can distinguish between seasonal streams and centuries-old superhighways like the ancient Puratam Canal. One striking discovery came from declassified Cold War-era Corona spy satellite photos. Their high-resolution film, intended for tracking missile sites, captured faint crop marks aligning perfectly with Babylonian cuneiform maps of the Second Euphrates. Suddenly, poetic references in ancient texts became tangible landscapes. Ports mentioned in trade records now had physical locations, even if those sites today sit miles from any visible water. These digital maps are rewriting history books in real time. Near the ruins of Uruk, satellite data revealed a sprawling delta-like network where the Euphrates once split into 5 major distributaries, not the single channel we see now. This explains why the city's tablets describe ships arriving from multiple directions, something that previously puzzled historians. Even more astonishing was the detection of a massive circular canal surrounding Babylon, a hydrological moat matching Herodotus' disputed account of the city's water walls. What scholars once dismissed as Greek exaggeration now appears to be precise engineering on a staggering scale. The implications ripple far beyond cartography. By overlaying these river maps with archaeological sites, patterns emerge that challenge old assumptions. Many isolated temples and forts turn out to sit precisely at the intersections of lost waterways, suggesting they were once bustling way stations. Trade routes we thought followed winding overland paths actually ran straight via rivers now buried under dunes. At Tel al-Daylam, a site dismissed as a minor village, subsurface scans showed docks capable of handling 50 ships, proof it was a major hub on a vanished branch of the Tigris. What makes this technology revolutionary isn't just its ability to find lost rivers, but to see how they behaved. Microwave radar from the European Space Agency's Sentinel-1 can detect subtle elevation changes, exposing where canals were deliberately straightened versus where they meandered naturally. This lets us distinguish human engineering from nature's handiwork. Near Kish, such data revealed a canal system that made perfect right-angle turns, clear evidence of surveying techniques we didn't know existed in the 3rd millennium BC. Perhaps most moving are the personal stories these digital rivers restore. At a nondescript mound called Tel Abu Tibera, satellite-guided excavations uncovered hundreds of fishing nets and boat models in what was clearly a riverside neighborhood. Yet today, the nearest water is 12 miles away. The emotional weight hits hard when you realize we're not just mapping silt and clay, we're recovering the lived experience of people who laughed, traded, and prayed along waterways that vanished without a trace. As these technologies advance, each new scan peels back another layer of forgetting. LiDAR-equipped drones are now detecting shallow channels even satellites miss, while AI algorithms cross-reference ancient texts with subsurface patterns to predict where undiscovered ports might lie. The picture emerging is of a Mesopotamia that was less a land between 2 rivers than a vast, pulsing delta, a place where water shaped destiny, and where its retreats left civilizations scrambling to adapt. In these digital echoes of lost streams, we're finding not just the bones of a landscape, but the veins that once carried its lifeblood. Cuneiform tablets are more than ancient receipts, they're snapshots of a world shaped by water. Take the case of a lawsuit tablet from where 2 farmers accused each other of stealing irrigation flow. The detailed testimony describes canals down to the width of a hand, mentioning tributaries that don't appear on any modern map. One witness even references a silent water god's branch, a poetic name for a distributary we've since identified through soil cores near Lhasa. these legal disputes weren't just about water rights, they were about survival in a landscape where rivers dictated who thrived and who starved. Royal inscriptions add another layer to the puzzle. When Babylonian kings like Hammurabi boasted of taming the wild waters, they weren't exaggerating. A foundation tablet beneath the walls of Sippar details the exact workforce: 2,000 laborers, 600 brickmakers assigned to reinforce the Euphrates levees after a catastrophic flood. The text specifies the project's duration, 11 months, and even lists the daily beer ration for workers. Such precision lets us calculate water volumes, revealing how much more the river carried compared to today. Yet some mysteries defy even these meticulous records. The Great Darrow Canal, mentioned in 12 tablets from Mari, vanishes from texts after the reign of Zimri-Lim. Satellite imagery recently confirmed its path, a 30-mile channel linking the Koba River to wheat fields near Turka. But why was it abandoned? A broken tablet hints at salt invading the beds, while another blames the enemy's digging. The truth may lie in a third fragment, still untranslated, where a scribe laments that the water refuses the old ways. The most haunting gaps concern rivers that disappeared from records entirely. The two-faced river appears in early Sumerian hymns as a dual-channeled wonder, yet by Akkadian times it's mentioned only in curses. May your fields thirst like the two-faced. Ground-penetrating radar near Nippur found matching sediment layers, proof of a bifurcated river that dried mid-course, possibly due to an upstream landslide. That such a major feature could fade from memory speaks to how fluid Mesopotamia's hydrology truly was. What brings these fragments to life are the mundane details. A merchant's ledger from Umma lists tolls paid at 7 river crossings, 5 of which now lie under desert. A schoolboy's practice tablet repeats the phrase, "The boat to departs when the water is high," reminding us these were living routes, not abstract lines on clay. Even failed predictions hold value. An astrologer's warning that the Euphrates will rise 12 cubits, it rose 7, reveals how desperately they sought to predict the unpredictable. The real revelation isn't just what these tablets say, it's what they omit. Nowhere do scribes mention the Puratam Canal's final days, though its silting doomed a dozen cities. No dirges mourn the Shat al-Nil's retreat, though it collapsed trade networks. This silence may be the most telling clue of all. Societies often document their triumphs, but rarely their slow surrenders to a changing world. As we piece together these hydrological puzzles, we're not just reconstructing riverbeds, we're hearing the whispers of civilizations learning too late that water gives, but it also takes away. Yoruk's rise and fall reads like an epic poem written in mud bricks and dried riverbeds. At its peak around 3000 BC, this Mesopotamian metropolis was home to nearly 80,000 people, a staggering number for the ancient world, all sustained by an intricate web of canals fed by the Euphrates' western branch. The city's very name became synonymous with urban grandeur. The Yoruk expansion saw its influence ripple across the Near East through trade networks floating on those vital waterways. Yet walk through its ruins today and you'll find something peculiar. Docks built to welcome ships now open onto nothing but cracked earth, their stone mooring posts standing like sentinels guarding an absent sea. Archaeologists peeling back Yoruk's layers have uncovered a city progressively at war with its own geography. The deepest excavations reveal wide, well-maintained canals lined with bitumen to prevent leaks, proof of early prosperity. But climb through the strata and the story darkens. Higher layers show canals narrowed by emergency repairs, their walls hastily shored up with debris from demolished buildings. By 2000 BC, workers were digging through their own garbage to reach water, filling baskets with broken pottery and animal bones to reinforce collapsing banks. The most poignant find, a series of increasingly shallow wells in the temple district, their sides scarred by rope marks where priests lowered vessels ever deeper into the earth. What makes Uruk's collapse so telling isn't just the physical evidence, but the administrative panic preserved in clay. Tablets from the final decades describe water judges appointed to ration dwindling supplies, their verdicts punishing water theft with unprecedented severity. One records a brewer fined 6 months' wages for diverting a canal, unthinkable in earlier times when water flowed abundantly. Another lists 27 neighborhoods abandoned due to dry feet, a euphemism for areas beyond the water's reach. Even Gilgamesh, Uruk's legendary king, couldn't hold back the desert forever. The river's betrayal came in stages. First, the Euphrates' main channel migrated eastward, leaving Uruk dependent on a single distributary. Then sedimentation choked that lifeline, forcing engineers to dig a bypass canal, an astonishing feat still visible as a straight scar across satellite images. For a generation, this artificial artery sustained the city, but sediment cores tell the rest, layers of freshwater mollusks abruptly capped by wind-blown sand. The final blow likely came when upstream cities, also parched, diverted the last trickles for themselves. Uruk didn't so much collapse as evaporate, its population dispersing like morning mist over the drained canals. Modern parallels are impossible to ignore. Like Uruk, Phoenix and Las Vegas bloomed in arid lands by mastering water engineering, but both now face declining river flows. The difference, Uruk had no groundwater pumps to delay the inevitable. Its ruins stand as a stark monument to civilizations that mistake hydrological ingenuity for permanence. Yet there's hope in the ashes. Recent excavations show some residents adapted, shifting to pastoralism or moving to wetter regions. Their resilience whispers across millennia, a reminder that while cities may perish, people find ways to endure when the waters change their course. Among the labyrinth of waterways in southern Iraq, the Marsh Arabs move through the wetlands as if stepping through a portal to Mesopotamia's past. Their towering reed houses, clustered on floating islands, mirror descriptions from 4,000-year-old Sumerian texts. The same slender boats that once carried goods between Ur and Babylon still glide through these marshes, now piloted by fishermen casting nets much as their ancestors did. Even the water buffalo, wallowing in the shallows, trace their lineage to beasts that plodded through these same reeds when Hammurabi's laws were still new. This isn't just cultural continuity, it's a living museum of hydraulic traditions that sustained the world's first cities. The marshes themselves are remnants of a lost hydrological world. Fed by the Tigris distributaries, these wetlands are the last fragments of the vast inland deltas that once made southern Mesopotamia a garden of abundance. Satellite images reveal something astonishing. The Marsh Arabs' water channels follow nearly identical paths to canals described in cuneiform tablets from Larsa and Lagash. Their annual cycle of flood-based farming, planting as waters recede, harvesting before summer's heat, mirrors techniques depicted on cylinder seals from 5,000 years ago. In their daily rhythms, we see the ghostly echo of a time when such practices nourished millions across the region, yet this living heritage nearly vanished within living memory. In the 1990s, Saddam Hussein's regime drained over 90% of the marshes, turning lush waterways into cracked salt flats. The ecological catastrophe displaced 300,000 Marsh Arabs, scattering a culture that had endured since the dawn of civilization. Canals that had flowed since Akkadian times were bulldozed, their waters diverted to punish rebellious communities. What took millennia to refine was erased in a decade, severing one of humanity's oldest unbroken connections to its hydraulic past. The marsh's partial recovery offers a glimmer of hope. After 2003, locals and environmentalists breached dikes, allowing the Tigris to reclaim portions of its ancient domain. Reeds returned with startling speed, and with them the traditional knowledge embedded in Marsh Arab culture. Elders who remembered old water songs taught younger generations how to read subtle currents, skills honed over generations but nearly lost. Even the buffalo herds rebounded, their dung once again fertilizing the wetlands as it did when Sumerian poets praised the land's fertility. What makes their story so compelling isn't just survival, but adaptation. Modern Marsh Arabs blend ancient techniques with solar-powered water pumps and mobile phones, proving tradition isn't about rejecting change, it's about steering it. Their struggle mirrors Mesopotamia's oldest lesson. Civilizations flourish when they work with water's rhythms, not against them. As climate change threatens Iraq with hotter droughts and saltier soils, these wetlands may hold more than cultural memory. They could preserve agricultural wisdom vital for the region's future. The marsh's fate now hangs between two tides, one of restoration, the other of renewed threats. Upstream dams in Turkey and Iran have reduced the Tigris flow to a trickle during critical seasons, while pollution from distant cities seeps into the remaining channels. Yet every reed house rebuilt, every buffalo herd replenished, is a testament to resilience. In these wetlands, the past isn't just remembered, it's lived. And that makes their survival more than an ecological concern. It's a race to safeguard the last living thread connecting us to the world's first river-borne civilizations. Trade routes in ancient Mesopotamia pulsed like lifeblood through the veins of its rivers. Carrying more than water, they transported the very foundations of civilization. Picture a bustling port at where ships from distant lands unloaded gleaming lapis lazuli from Afghanistan, tin for bronze making all the way from the Hindu Kush, and delicate carnelian beads traced back to the Indus Valley. These weren't isolated exchanges, they formed a web of commerce stretching thousands of miles, all possible because rivers turned geography into a connected marketplace. The moment a boat could float from the Persian Gulf to the heart of Babylon, the world shrank for Mesopotamian merchants, and empires rose on the backs of these liquid highways. But this connectivity came with razor-thin margins. When the Euphrates abandoned its western branch near the city of Mari, the effects rippled across continents. Overnight, docks built to receive copper from Oman became useless, forcing traders onto perilous desert caravans. Texts from Mari's final years lament the silent harbors, where once busy warehouses stood empty, their floors littered with broken seals from unused shipments. The economic shockwaves reached even farther. Archaeologists found Indus Valley seals in Mesopotamian ruins dating before the drought, but none after, suggesting an entire trade corridor vanished when the water did. Adaptation often meant reinvention. At Tel Leilan, a northern outpost, merchants shifted from importing luxury goods to producing local imitations when rivers could no longer deliver the real thing. Excavations revealed workshops where artisans turned inferior stones into lapis-like beads, and texts boasted of mountain tin that chemical analysis later proved was recycled bronze. Yet some cities turned crisis into opportunity. When the Tigris main channel shifted away from a shore, its merchants pioneered overland routes to Anatolia, eventually dominating the tin trade through sheer logistical grit. Their secret, using surviving tributaries as way stations, creating a relay system where goods moved via short hops between remaining waterways. The most ingenious solutions came from those who listened to the rivers themselves. At Gersu, engineers noticed seasonal floods temporarily reconnecting dormant channels. They timed their trade missions like clockwork, dispatching convoys during brief windows when ancient routes flickered back to life. Tablets describe the moon's water dances, carefully calculated periods when high tides in the Persian Gulf pushed salt water upstream, allowing ships to sail farther inland than normally possible. This wasn't just navigation, it was hydrological alchemy, turning fleeting moments into economic lifelines. What emerges from these stories isn't just a tale of resourcefulness, but a profound truth about civilization's dependence on nature's whims. A single dried-up distributary could unravel supply chains as effectively as a modern port strike, leaving entire industries scrambling. Yet Mesopotamians didn't just survive these disruptions, they learned to read the river's moods, adapting their economies with a flexibility that puts many modern systems to shame. Their legacy whispers a warning across millennia that trade routes, no matter how advanced, are only as reliable as the waterways that sustain them. The legend of the Garden of Eden whispers through Mesopotamia's lost rivers like an echo across time. Genesis describes 4 rivers branching from Eden, the familiar Tigris and Euphrates, plus 2 mysterious waterways, the Pishon and Gihon. For centuries, scholars have puzzled over these phantom tributaries, but recent discoveries suggest they might not be mythical at all. Satellite images reveal ancient riverbeds snaking through what's now the Arabian Desert, dry channels that once carried water from the highlands to the Persian Gulf. One of these, the now vanished Karan River, fits startlingly close to descriptions of the Pishon, which biblical texts say flowed through the land of Havilah, rich with gold and aromatic resins. Archaeologists have uncovered something remarkable along these ghostly waterways. Near the dried-up Wadi Batin in Kuwait, teams found stone tools and fire pits dating back 7,000 years, evidence of lush valleys where hunter-gatherers thrived. This wasn't always desert. Core samples from the Gulf seabed tell a dramatic story. Around 6,000 years ago, rising sea levels drowned Mesopotamia's coastline, pushing saltwater inland and turning freshwater deltas into barren flats. Could Eden's expulsion myth humanity forced from paradise preserve ancestral memories of this climate catastrophe? The timing aligns eerily with Sumerian flood myths like the Epic of Gilgamesh, where gods punish humanity by withdrawing nature's bounty. The Gihon presents another tantalizing clue. Ancient Jewish texts identify it with a spring near Jerusalem, but some scholars argue this was a later adaptation. Earlier Mesopotamian traditions point to the Diyala River, a Tigris tributary that once nourished Assyria's heartland before shifting course. Cuneiform tablets from Nineveh mention a sacred confluence called the Navel of the Waters, possibly the original 4 rivers junction that inspired Eden's imagery. At Tel al-Wilaya, excavations revealed a Bronze Age shrine built precisely where 2 dry channels intersect, its altars oriented toward long-vanished streams. What emerges isn't just a hydrological mystery, but a cultural palimpsest. The Eden story may compress millennia of environmental change into symbolic narrative, the Pishon and Gihon representing real rivers that vanished as Mesopotamia dried, their absence transformed into divine punishment. Even the cherubim guarding Eden's entrance find parallels in Assyrian Lamashu statues that protected sacred springs. This isn't to reduce myth to mere metaphor, but to recognize how deeply human stories are rooted in lived landscapes. When rivers that sustained generations disappeared, their memory persisted in sacred texts, a testament to how profoundly water shapes civilization's imagination. The most poignant evidence comes from Eden's proposed locations. Near Basra, where the Tigris and Euphrates meet, date palms still thrive in saline soil, stubborn reminders of the region's lost fertility. Local oral traditions speak of a time when the land was threaded with silver, a possible allusion to shimmering waterways now buried under dunes. As climate models predict worsening droughts for modern Iraq, Eden's legacy feels unsettlingly relevant, not just as a lost paradise, but as a warning about humanity's fragile pact with flowing water. Perhaps the real lesson of Eden isn't where it was, but what happens when the rivers that feed civilizations disappear. Beneath the ruins of Babylon, modern technology has uncovered a hidden lattice of waterways that once pulsed through the heart of Nebuchadnezzar's Roman II Empire. Electrical resistivity tomography, a technique that sends currents through the earth to map subsurface structures, reveals ghostly channels snaking beneath the desert, their precise paths aligning with ancient descriptions of the city's veins of life. One particularly striking discovery is a massive conduit running directly toward the presumed site of the Hanging Gardens, its walls lined with bitumen to prevent leaks. This wasn't just irrigation, it was hydraulic precision on a scale that would impress modern engineers. The sophistication of these canals speaks to Babylon's obsession with controlling water. Cuneiform tablets describe teams of surveyors using weighted ropes and sighting poles to calculate gradients so exact that water flowed uphill, or so it seemed. In reality, they mastered the art of illusion, constructing stepped aqueducts that created the appearance of ascending streams. The garden's legendary terraces may have relied on this very technology, with hidden screw pumps lifting water from the Euphrates through a network of ceramic pipes. But why bury such marvels? Excavations near the Ishtar Gate uncovered sections of canal deliberately filled with rubble, some containing shattered statues of water deities. This suggests a deliberate act of erasure, possibly during the Persian conquest when invaders sought to symbolically dry up Babylon's power. The mystery deepens when we examine the canal's construction. Unlike Egypt's monumental stone waterways, Babylon's were built with modular baked brick segments, allowing easy repairs and equally easy dismantling. Archaeologists found peculiar grooves in some bricks, matching descriptions of water gates mentioned in Nebuchadnezzar's inscriptions. These were likely sluices designed to divert flow during maintenance, proving the system was as much about adaptability as grandeur. Yet the real revelation came from soil analysis. Layers of sediment show these canals weren't just buried. They were ritually purified with layers of clean sand before being sealed, as if their closing was a sacred act. Perhaps the most tantalizing clue lies in a recently deciphered tablet from Sippar. It recounts how Babylonian priests, fearing the gardens would drink the city dry, secretly redirected a primary canal during a drought. This could explain the abrupt silting detected in one major channel, not an engineering failure, but a desperate conservation measure. The garden's decline might not have been due to conquest or neglect, but to an early lesson in ecological balance. As modern cities from Phoenix to Bangalore grapple with dwindling water supplies, Babylon's hidden canals offer a sobering reminder. Even the greatest hydraulic wonders are only as enduring as the rivers that feed them. The Roman III dynasty didn't just fight for land, they waged war over liquid gold. In the dusty archives of ancient Sumer, clay tablets recount battles where victory wasn't measured in conquered cities, but in captured canals. One particularly vivid text from the reign of King Sholgi describes how rival city-states tampered with sluice gates under cover of darkness, diverting the lifeblood of entire regions. This wasn't mere sabotage, it was hydrological warfare, where a single altered watercourse could doom harvests and collapse economies. The stakes couldn't have been higher. At Gersu, archaeologists uncovered a massive clay nail inscribed with a royal decree threatening death to anyone who turns the water against the king's will. Nearby, they found the ruins of a guard tower overlooking what was once a critical canal junction, proof that water infrastructure demanded military protection. The Roman three kings didn't just build canals, they fortified them like border citadels, stationing soldiers at strategic Chinese letter points. What's striking is how modern these ancient conflicts feel. A tablet from Umma details a dispute with Lagash that reads like a contemporary water rights lawsuit. Accusations of upstream farmers drinking the share of downstream communities, complete with witness testimonies and damning accounting records. The resolution: a royal inspector was dispatched to measure flow rates using standardized bronze gauges, an early example of water diplomacy. But the real shock came when researchers cross-referenced these texts with satellite imagery. The Great Drying, described in Ur's final years, aligns perfectly with sediment cores showing abrupt sedimentation in the Tigris main channel. It wasn't just enemies choking off canals, nature itself had turned against them. As modern nations from the Nile to the Colorado River grapple with similar tensions, the Roman III dynasty's struggles remind us that water wars aren't a future threat. They're an ancient pattern repeating itself, with stakes just as dire today as they were 4,000 years ago. Floods in Mesopotamia didn't just reshape the land, they rewrote human destiny. The same waters that deposited fertile silt across the floodplains could, without warning, erase cities from the map. Take the Great Deluge described in the Epic of Gilgamesh, a story so strikingly similar to Noah's Ark that it echoes across cultures. This wasn't just myth-making. Deep beneath the ruins of archaeologists uncovered a 10-foot layer of clean silt, devoid of pottery or debris, a silent witness to a flood so catastrophic it buried everything in its path. Radiocarbon dating places this event around 2900 BCE, coinciding with the abrupt abandonment of early Sumerian settlements. The scale is hard to fathom, a wall of water sweeping down the Tigris-Euphrates valley with enough force to reroute rivers and redraw coastlines. But how did these floods alter Mesopotamia's hydrological map? Sediment cores tell a dramatic story. Near Kish, researchers found evidence of the Euphrates abruptly carving a new channel through what had been farmland, leaving the old riverbed to wither into a ghost stream. The force was unimaginable. Boulders the size of chariots were carried miles downstream, coming to rest in layers that now sit buried under desert sands. Even more telling are the ruins of ports rebuilt at higher elevations, their original docks now stranded far from any water. At Shurapak, tablets describe engineers desperately diverting canals to follow the Euphrates' new course, a task akin to chasing a runaway serpent. Climate models paint an unsettling picture of history poised to repeat itself. Modern simulations of ancient weather patterns suggest these megafloods were triggered by a perfect storm, snowmelt from the Zagros Mountains colliding with unprecedented rainfall, all funneled into Mesopotamia's low-lying plains. Today, with rising global temperatures increasing the likelihood of extreme weather, the region faces eerily familiar threats. The Mosul Dam, built on unstable geology, has been called a time bomb by engineers. Its failure could unleash a deluge rivaling those of antiquity. What's often overlooked is how these disasters birthed innovation. The same flood that drowned Shurapak also inspired the world's first known levees, earthen berms reinforced with reeds and bitumen. At Gersu, excavators found a massive sluice gate system designed to absorb flood surges, its wooden beams still bearing the tool marks of Bronze Age carpenters. Even the famous Code of Hammurabi included laws mandating communal responsibility for canal maintenance, a recognition that survival depended on collective water management. The legacy of Mesopotamia's floods lingers in unexpected places. Traditional Marsh Arab houses still perch on artificial mounds, a design perfected over millennia of avoiding sudden inundations. Proverbs' warning, "The river gives, but it also takes," endure in Iraqi folklore. And perhaps most hauntingly, satellite images reveal ghostly paleochannels, ancient riverbeds filled in by long-dried floods, threading beneath modern cities like spectral reminders of nature's power. As we confront our own era of climate instability, these buried waterways whisper a timeless truth. Civilizations rise and fall not just by human hands, but by the caprice of the waters that sustain them. The Sasanian Empire didn't just inherit Mesopotamia's crumbling waterways, they reinvented them with an ambition that would make modern engineers blush. At the height of their power in the 6th century CE, King Khosrow I launched a hydraulic revolution, transforming the arid plains between the Tigris and Euphrates into a green marvel. The crown jewel was the Narwan Canal, a 200-mile serpent of engineered water slicing through the desert. Unlike the haphazard canals of earlier eras, this was precision hydrology on an industrial scale, 30 feet deep in places, with mathematically calculated slopes that kept water flowing at perfect speed. Roman diplomats who saw it wrote home in disbelief, comparing its scale to the Nile's annual floods. What made the Narwan extraordinary wasn't just its size, but its resilience. Sasanian engineers lined the canal with a unique mortar of crushed pottery and lime, creating a waterproof seal that resisted erosion for centuries. They built a network of secondary channels with a UTOMATIC Chinese letter gates, weights, and counterbalances that adjusted water flow without human intervention. At its peak, this system irrigated over 6,000 square miles of farmland, feeding a population density that wouldn't be matched again until the 20th century. The secret lay in the details. Elevated aqueducts carried water over natural depressions, while underground canals tapped distant groundwater to supplement the flow. Yet today, finding the Narwan requires detective work. Satellite images reveal its ghostly trace, a faint green line where crops grow slightly taller over the buried channel. Near Ctesiphon, bulldozers occasionally uncover perfectly preserved brick arches that once funneled water to royal orchards. The contrast between these ruins and contemporary accounts is startling. Persian poets describe the canal's waters as so clear you could count the pebbles at midnight, while tax records boast of 3 harvests per year along its banks. The Narwan's disappearance is a puzzle wrapped in layers of silt and politics. Climate played a role. Tree rings from the Zagros Mountains show a prolonged drought beginning in the 7th century that starved the system. But the death blow came from conquest. When Arab armies swept through Mesopotamia in the 630s, they prioritized maintaining military roads over repairing canals. A single surviving tax document from Basra reveals the tragic aftermath. Fields that once paid in wheat now assessed at half value for grazing rights. Without constant maintenance, the Narwan's carefully calculated slopes clogged with sediment, its waters spilling uncontrolled until the desert reclaimed them. The most haunting legacy lies in the small choices that sealed the canal's fate. Archaeologists working near Baghdad found Sasanian sluice gates frozen in the open position, suggesting a final act of neglect rather than catastrophic failure. Irrigation tablets from the early Islamic period still refer to the Great Canal, but within 2 generations its name fades from records. By the time Marco Polo passed through, the Narwan was just another desert rumor, a phantom waterway that sustained an empire, then vanished into the very earth it had once conquered. What makes this loss so poignant is how close the Sasanians came to defying Mesopotamia's hydrological curse. Their canals weren't just bigger, they were smarter, designed to outlast dynasties. Yet in the end, even their brilliance couldn't withstand the twin forces of nature and human forgetfulness. As modern Iraq struggles with dwindling water supplies, the Narwan's bones whisper a sobering lesson that civilization's greatest hydraulic triumphs are often just temporary victories in an endless war against the desert. The Mosul Dam, a hulking concrete giant straddling the Tigris, holds back more than just water. It submerged entire chapters of Mesopotamia's story beneath its reservoir. When its floodgates closed in the 1980s, the rising waters swallowed ancient riverbeds where Assyrian merchants once anchored their boats, along with forgotten trade posts mentioned in cuneiform tablets. But here's the twist: the same engineering that erased history is now trying to save it. Underwater drones equipped with sonar have mapped drowned settlements near the dam's base, revealing the outlines of a Bronze Age port city eerily preserved in the depths. Its warehouses, still stacked with amphorae, now exist in a silent aquatic museum, visible only through pixelated scans on archaeologist screens. This collision between progress and preservation isn't unique to Mosul. The Kebun Dam in Turkey flooded a stretch of the upper Euphrates, taking with it Hittite temples and Eurasian fortresses. Yet from this loss came an unexpected breakthrough. Engineers working on Iraq's latest dam projects now collaborate with historians, using predictive modeling to simulate how reservoirs might shift ancient riverbeds and which sites could be silently carried away by the currents. At the Elisu Dam, teams employed satellite-guided dredging to excavate entire Neo-Assyrian villages before the waters rose, relocating temples stone by stone to higher ground. It's a race against time and tide, where hydraulic equations share spreadsheet space with translations of 4,000-year-old flood myths. The stakes go beyond archaeology. Traditional Marsh Arab communities, whose way of life mirrors Mesopotamia's ancient hydrology, face existential threats from these dams. Upstream projects have reduced the Tigris flow to a trickle during critical growing seasons, turning wetlands into cracked earth. Yet some engineers are turning to the past for solutions. A pilot project near Nasiriyah resurrects Babylonian techniques, using woven reed barriers to control erosion, a fusion of modern materials and ancient wisdom. Even the dams themselves are being reimagined. Iraq's latest designs incorporate silt traps inspired by those found in Sumerian canals, slowing the reservoir-clogging sediment that doomed earlier projects. What emerges is a delicate dance between two kinds of engineering, one harnessing water for power, the other striving to protect the cultures that water once nurtured. Satellite imagery now guides dam releases to mimic natural flood cycles, sustaining downstream ecosystems that haven't seen such rhythms since Sasanian times. At the ruins of Nineveh, hydrologists monitor groundwater levels with sensors embedded in ancient bricks, ensuring the city's fragile remains don't dry out or dissolve. The lesson written in these efforts is clear: Mesopotamia's rivers aren't just resources to exploit, but living archives whose currents carry the fingerprints of forgotten civilizations. The challenge ahead isn't just technical, it's philosophical. Can a dam be more than a barrier? At Haditha, engineers are experimenting with transparent reservoirs, leaving archaeological zones accessible via underwater tunnels and glass observation decks. Meanwhile, virtual reality reconstructions let researchers and the public walk through digitally resurrected cities now lying beneath the waves. These innovations hint at a future where infrastructure doesn't just coexist with history, but actively illuminates it. As climate change tightens its grip on Iraq's water supply, the ghosts of Mesopotamia's rivers remind us that every drop carries echoes of the past, and the choices we make today will ripple through the stories told 4,000 years from now. Beneath the cracked, sun-baked earth of southern Iraq, a silent catastrophe unfolded over centuries, one that turned the Fertile Crescent into a cautionary tale. Soil cores pulled from around ancient Ur tell a grim story. Layers rich with wheat pollen abruptly give way to bands of salt crystals, then finally wind-blown dust. This wasn't some natural disaster, it was an ecological unraveling set in motion by human hands. Mesopotamian farmers, masters of irrigation, inadvertently poisoned their own land with every diverted canal. The very waters that nourished their crops carried dissolved salts from upstream mountains, depositing them in fields with each watering. Over generations, the buildup became irreversible. Cuneiform tablets from Lhasa plead for tax relief as yields plummeted, their desperate etchings describing white death creeping across the fields. The consequences rippled far beyond agriculture. At the city of Lagash, archaeologists found entire neighborhoods abandoned in phases. First the potters who needed clean water for clay, then the brewers, then finally the temples as offerings dwindled. A scribe's letter from this era captures the despair. The gods have turned their backs, for even the salt tears of the people cannot make the barley grow. As southern soils failed, power shifted northward to Babylon and Ashur, where rivers ran fresher. This wasn't just a change of capitals, it rewrote cultural identity. The Sumerian language, once dominant, faded as Akkadian-speaking northerners rose, their dialects shaped by different hydrological realities. Modern parallels are unnerving. Today's satellite images show Iraq's farmland retreating before advancing salt crusts, with up to 30% of irrigated land now too saline for most crops. The ancient Mesopotamians at least had the option of moving north, a luxury modern populations don't share amid political borders and overstretched resources. Their solutions, though, were remarkably prescient. Excavations at Nippur reveal fallow fields deliberately left unplanted for years to allow rainwater to flush out salts, a practice modern agronomists call leaching and now recommend for California's Central Valley. Even more striking, Babylonian crop rotation records show alternating barley with salt-tolerant dates, a biodiversity strategy echoed in today's push for climate-resilient farming. The tragedy isn't that Mesopotamians failed to understand their crisis, it's how clearly they documented their own decline. A 2,000-year-old tablet from Uruk contains what might be history's first environmental audit, a meticulous account of canal salinity levels paired with crop yields. They knew, yet despite this awareness, short-term survival trumped long-term planning. Kings prioritized feeding growing cities over sustainable practices, much like modern governments subsidizing water-intensive crops in drought zones. The lesson isn't just about salt, it's about the peril of prioritizing immediate abundance over systemic balance. Nowhere is this more evident than at Tello, ancient Guernsey, where French archaeologists recently mapped a sprawling canal network using drones. The site's most haunting feature, a series of emergency wells dug ever deeper as groundwater turned brackish, their sides scarred by frantic claw marks. These weren't engineering projects, they were acts of desperation. As modern Iraq faces worsening water scarcity, with the Tigris and Euphrates diminished by upstream dams and rising temperatures, the ghosts of Mesopotamia's choices whisper across millennia. Their canals didn't just carry water, they carried the seeds of their own collapse, a reminder that civilizations flourish not by conquering nature, but by dancing with its rhythms. The marshes of southern Iraq, long written off as a lost cause, are staging a quiet but remarkable comeback. After decades of deliberate draining reduced these wetlands to just 10% of their original size, reflooding efforts have brought nearly half of the vanished ecosystem back to life. The speed of this recovery defies expectations. Within months of breached dikes allowing the Tigris to reclaim its ancient distributaries, reed beds that hadn't been seen since Saddam Hussein's campaign against the Marsh Arabs began sprouting anew. Endangered marbled teal ducks, absent for generations, now dart through restored waterways, while the distinctive cough-like calls of the Basra reed warbler, once thought locally extinct once again echo across the wetlands at dusk. This isn't just ecological restoration, it's a living testament to the land's memory. Hydrologists working near Tributaries made a startling discovery. Reflooded areas spontaneously reconnected along nearly identical paths to Babylonian-era canal maps. The water, it seems, recalled its old routes, seeking out buried channels invisible to the human eye. Satellite imagery confirms the phenomenon. Thermal scans show new water flows precisely tracing ghostly outlines detected beneath the desert surface. Even more astonishing, traditional Marsh Arab fish traps placed where elders remembered ancestral fishing grounds proved immediately productive, as if the aquatic life had been waiting in subterranean reservoirs for the water's return. The implications for modern desertification challenges are profound. In Al-Hamma Marsh, experimental plots using ancient Sumerian irrigation techniques yielded 30% more crops than adjacent fields using modern sprinklers. The secret lies in a practice called pulse flooding, mimicking the Tigris' natural seasonal surges by briefly saturating fields before allowing controlled drainage. This not only prevents salt buildup but encourages deep root growth, just as Mesopotamian farmers documented on clay tablets 4,000 years ago. Nearby, researchers are testing Babylonian-style silt traps made from woven reeds and bitumen, which outperform concrete barriers in distributing nutrient-rich sediments across parched land. Yet the most promising innovations blend old wisdom with new technology. Solar-powered pumps now draw from reconstructed Canals Persian-inspired underground channels that reduce evaporation loss, while sensors monitor soil salinity with the precision ancient agronomists could only dream of. Near Nasiriyah, a pilot project combines satellite-guided water releases with Marsh Arab planting calendars based on lunar cycles, creating a hybrid system that's both high-tech and deeply traditional. The results speak for themselves. Areas that were dust bowls 5 years ago now support date palms and barley, their roots tapping into resurrected waterways. The challenges remain daunting. Upstream dams in Turkey and Iran have reduced the Tigris flow by nearly half since 1970, while pollution from Baghdad's industries threatens to poison the recovery. But the marsh's partial rebirth offers a glimmer of hope, proof that even ecosystems pushed to the brink can rebound when given the chance. As climate change intensifies droughts across the Middle East, these wetlands stand as both a warning and a blueprint, a reminder that humanity's oldest water management strategies might hold keys to surviving an increasingly arid future. The land remembers. The question is whether we will learn from its memories before it's too late. The disappearance of Mesopotamia's rivers wasn't the work of a single villain. It was a slow unraveling woven from nature's whims and human miscalculation. Take the case of the Pallacopas Canal, where sediment cores reveal alternating layers of flood silt and wind-blown dust, like pages in a geological diary. At first glance, this seems like a classic climate shift, the fingerprints of prolonged droughts recorded in tree rings from the Zagros Mountains. But dig deeper and another story emerges. Mixed with those natural layers are bands of pottery shards and compacted brick dust, evidence of frantic repairs by Babylonian engineers fighting a losing battle against the canal's own success. The more they expanded irrigation, the faster silt choked the channels, creating a vicious cycle of dredging and decline. Then there's the seismic factor. Near the ancient city of Sippar, archaeologists found a stretch of the Euphrates' old course abruptly offset by 16 feet, a displacement matching descriptions of a great shaking in cuneiform tablets from Hammurabi's reign. Ground-penetrating radar confirms the culprit, an undocumented fault line that rerouted the river overnight, leaving temples high and dry. similar tectonic surprises litter the region. At Tel al-Wilaya, a once thriving port now sits a mile from any water because the land literally tilted. A phenomenon modern GPS monitors confirm still occurs at rates of nearly an inch per year. Human engineering often accelerated these natural processes. Assyrian inscriptions boast of diverting entire rivers to starve rebellious cities, not realizing these temporary measures could become permanent. One chilling example comes from a clay letter found near Mari, where a governor warns his king that enemy tampering with a sluice gate had killed the water's path. Core samples from that very location show an abrupt change from river mud to desert sand within a single decade, a hydrological murder scene. Even well-intentioned projects backfired. The vast Narwan Canal, pride of the Sasanian Empire, inadvertently lowered groundwater tables by intercepting natural recharge flows, a mistake modern hydrologists call the Canals effect. The most revealing evidence lies in the soil itself. Across southern Mesopotamia, salt crusts tell a damning story. Ancient farmers, desperate to feed growing cities, over-irrigated fields until evaporation concentrated salts to toxic levels. At Gersu, researchers found barley seeds preserved in storage jars, their stunted size and twisted shapes matching modern crops grown in saline soil. Tax records from Roman III list fields reclassified from barley-rich to salt bitterness within a single generation. This wasn't just bad luck, it was an ecological debt compounded by each harvest. Yet the greatest lesson lies in the interplay of these forces. When drought weakened the Akkadian Empire, it wasn't just the lack of rain that doomed them, it was their reliance on centralized canals that became liabilities when flows diminished. Similarly, the Sasanians' brilliant but brittle hydraulic network collapsed when political turmoil disrupted maintenance. The rivers didn't vanish from one cause, but from a perfect storm. Nature provided the push, while human choices determined the fall. Modern satellite imagery reveals the eerie symmetry of this decline. The same distributaries that once branched like veins across the land now show as ghostly thermal signatures, buried streams that failed not from a single catastrophe, but from countless small cuts. As today's water wars heat up along the Tigris and Euphrates, these ancient channels whisper a warning. Civilizations thrive when they work with water's rhythms, not when they try to command them. The sands of Mesopotamia aren't just burying rivers, they are preserving a masterclass in humility. Beneath the sun-scorched plains of modern Iraq, the past whispers through unexplored layers of earth. Less than 10% of Mesopotamia's archaeological treasures have seen the light of day. Imagine what secrets still lie buried, entire riverbeds, lost cities, and perhaps even the missing links between known waterways, all waiting for technology to reveal them. Tools like LiDAR, which can penetrate dense terrain to map hidden structures, are already rewriting history. In 2018, researchers scanning the Mesopotamian hinterlands near Nasiriyah stumbled upon the ghostly imprint of a colossal canal system, its branching arms stretching far beyond any previously recorded routes. This wasn't just another irrigation ditch, it was a hydrological superhighway linking three forgotten cities, their existence unknown until lasers peeled back the desert's skin. The potential for discovery is staggering. Satellite archaeologist Dr. Jesse Casona recently identified over 14,000 unexcavated sites using declassified Cold War-era infrared imagery alone. Some show eerie geometric patterns, perfect right angles and concentric circles, suggesting engineered waterways rather than natural flows. One particularly tantalizing anomaly near matches descriptions from a Sumerian tablet that mentions a great curved river used to transport temple stones. If confirmed, it could explain how massive limestone blocks traveled hundreds of miles in an era before wheels. But the real game-changer lies in subsurface scanning. Advanced ground-penetrating radar can now distinguish between layers of silt deposited by different historical floods, effectively creating a timeline of a river's movements. Near the ruins of Nippur, this technology revealed something astonishing. The Euphrates didn't shift course gradually, as previously thought. Instead, it made a sudden jump during a catastrophic flood around 1900 BC, leaving entire neighborhoods stranded almost overnight. Similar scans in Turkey's upper Tigris basin have detected the outlines of what may be the lost Herat River, a waterway mentioned in Hittite texts as the backbone of the Eastern trade. The implications go beyond academic curiosity. Every newly mapped canal recalibrates our understanding of ancient trade networks, agricultural capacity, and even military campaigns. For instance, the recent discovery of a buried channel running straight to the heart of Sippar suggests Babylon's conquest of the city wasn't just a land assault. Ships may have sailed directly to its walls. Even more provocative are the rumors from archaeologists working near the Iranian border, where whispers circulate of a potential fifth major river system hinted at in Elamite scrolls. If proven, it would force a complete redrawing of Mesopotamia's hydrological map. What makes this era of exploration so thrilling is the fusion of old and new. Drones equipped with thermal cameras can spot buried waterways at dawn when temperature differences make them visible, while AI algorithms cross-reference ancient texts with soil data to predict where to dig. At Tel al-Hiba, machine learning analyzed thousands of cuneiform shipping records to pinpoint the likely location of a vanished harbor, and when archaeologists dug, they found bitumen-coated docks exactly where the algorithm predicted. The most profound discoveries may still be beneath our feet. Some researchers speculate that early Sumerian cities were built atop even older settlements now submerged under millennia of silt, their stories locked in oxygen-starved layers where organic materials could be perfectly preserved. Others dream of finding the legendary underworld rivers described in Gilgamesh's journey, metaphorical perhaps, but possibly rooted in real subterranean flows that ancient engineers tapped into. One thing is certain, as long as deserts hide their secrets and technology keeps advancing, Mesopotamia's lost rivers will continue to resurface, each discovery a reminder that history isn't static, but a living thing still flowing beneath the sands. The lost rivers of Mesopotamia whisper a truth as old as civilization itself. Water shapes destiny, and when it vanishes, empires tremble. These ghostly channels aren't just relics of the past, they're mirrors reflecting our own precarious relationship with the planet's most precious resource. Consider Uruk, once a jewel of the ancient world, its docks bustling with ships from distant lands. Today, those same docks stand stranded in the desert, a silent testament to what happens when the waters retreat. But this isn't just ancient history. Look at modern Baghdad, where shrinking Tigris flows force neighborhoods to ration water, or the vanishing marshes of southern Iraq, where reflooding efforts race against time to restore what drainage destroyed. The pattern is unmistakable. Civilizations flourish when they honor water's rhythms and falter when they take it for granted. What makes Mesopotamia's lost rivers so compelling isn't just their disappearance, but the ingenuity they inspired. The Babylonians didn't surrender when the Euphrates shifted. They engineered canals like the Pallacopas, marvels of hydraulic precision. The Sasanians turned arid plains into fertile grids with the Narwan Canal, a feat of endurance that lasted centuries. These weren't just engineering triumphs, they were acts of reverence, acknowledging water as both giver and taker of life. Yet even their brilliance couldn't outlast nature's whims or the slow creep of salted earth. The lesson, adaptation isn't enough without balance. Today, as satellites map Mesopotamia's buried waterways, we're gifted with something our ancestors lacked: perspective. We can see the full arc of these rivers' lives: their birth in mountain snowmelt, their golden age as trade corridors, their slow suffocation under silt and sand. With this knowledge comes responsibility. Modern dams may harness water for millions, but they also replicate ancient mistakes, disrupting sediment flows and starving downstream deltas. The difference is we have the tools to choose differently. From AI predicting drought patterns to revived Babylonian leaching techniques that combat soil salinity, the past offers a toolkit for resilience. The most haunting question isn't what happened to these rivers, but why we keep repeating the same story. Perhaps it's because water's power is so easy to forget until it's gone. The Euphrates and Tigris still flow, but they're shadows of their former selves, taxed by upstream dams and warming climates. Yet in their struggle, there's hope. Marsh Arabs relearning ancient fishing practices, farmers rediscovering pulse flood irrigation, archaeologists partnering with engineers. These are the threads stitching past wisdom to future survival. So as we walk the dry beds of Mesopotamia's lost rivers, we're not just tracing the outlines of forgotten worlds. We're walking a tightrope between history and destiny, where every drop carries the weight of choices yet to be made. The rivers may be silent, but their message is clear. The fate of civilization still flows with the water. Now it's your turn. Which lost river's story resonates with you? Is it the Shat al-Nil's mysterious vanishing act, or the Pallacopas Canal's engineered brilliance? Share your thoughts below and join us as we keep unraveling history's liquid secrets. Don't forget to subscribe for the next chapter in humanity's endless dance with